Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Giere created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Giere, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And I am going to have so much fun with today's interview. This is a friend of mine. I love this woman. And we're just going to have so much fun. She is, of course, another C-suite network member. That's how I know many of my guests. But, it's just such a great resource for people. And but on top of that, my guest has such great content, and we're going to have so much fun talking today. So please join me in welcoming Nancy Giere to our program today. Welcome, Nancy. How are you doing?
I am doing great, Deb. Very glad to be with you today.
Hunky dory, hunky dory. Well, let me tell people a little bit about you, and then we will dive into this. So Nancy Giere is a course creation expert. She works with businesses of all sizes, from solopreneurs to Fortune 100 companies, to turn their expertise into high profit courses. She creates engaging, fun, and interactive programs that get results. She is the author of the just released book, Bundle Your Brilliance. There it is. She's being Vanna. Bundle Your Brilliance. Turn your expertise into profitable online courses. So again, Nancy, welcome.
Thank you.
Well, I always like to start my programs by asking my guests to tell us how they got to where they are today, because I think it's always very interesting. And, especially, how on earth did you decide that showing people how to do presentations is your passion in life?
Well, I'm going to take you in the Wayback Machine.
Oh, good.
We're going to go back to a time when before Al Gore invented the internet.
Oh my gosh.
That's how far back we're going to go. Mm-hmm. And I was working for the insurance subsidiary of a bank.
Okay.
And at this point in time, banks were getting ready to deregulate and sell more products than just typical banking things. And my boss asked me if I would put together a training program to train the people that worked on the account floor in our different insurance products. He said, "Yeah, you're a good talker. Okay, so sure. All right, I'll do it." I'd never done anything like that before in my life. So I put it together, and it was, it was good. I got everything going. I did have a lot of one-on-one conversations with people to help them after the program. So this is my entree into it, and I kind of liked it. So I continued on in working in the area of training, and I got a job with a company based in Naperville, Illinois. They're now been subsumed by one of the main platforms like Skillshare or Coursera or something like that. And they hired a group of 40 people all at once to be instructional designers. And I had no idea what an instructional designer was.
Right.
I had no idea it was a discipline and a whole methodology and an approach. So I was great. Everything that I worked on, I had a quality assurance manager review it, my direct manager review it. So I'm doing the work, I'm getting consistent feedback on the work. And they brought in Northern Illinois University to teach us about instructional design in a master's degree program.
Oh, wow.
So on my lunch hour, I'm basically learning about the profession at a more broad level. But this experience was like being an apprentice. And it really grounded me in my work. And I think it set me up for success more than some of my colleagues because of having that regular feedback. And one of the questions that my quality assurance manager would ask me is, what can we do to make it better?
Okay.
So now, fast forward, I kind of went through the ranks of every job you can have in a training department up to the director level. I had my own consultancy, was ran that for a while, went inside for a while, went back out for a while. And now we're at this point where, everybody with a computer wants to create a course.
Right.
Everybody thinks they need
Everybody
to have a course.
has PowerPoint.
Everybody has PowerPoint, and everybody has, now has a camera and lights and microphones, right? And there's like a missing link in what people are creating, and it's around really solid design principles. And I get it, why it happened, which is when the pandemic hit, people are like, oh my gosh, what do I do? How can I
can't meet people in person.
What am I going to do? So people rush to put their content online and did a lot of webinars and then said, okay, now I'm going to make this webinar and do an online course. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put an intro video and an outro video on it. Now I've got an online course. No.
Right.
What you have is a recording. And so we have a lot of recordings out there disguised as online courses. And for a while, didn't matter so much to people because we couldn't leave the house.
I know. You were kind of a captive audience.
So what the heck? I'll learn to play the guitar. What else am I going to do today?
Right.
I think now the market is getting more discerning and people are looking for, they want to learn, but everything needs to be tighter. It needs to be more well planned in order for it to really be effective. So I'm kind of on a mission now to really work with entrepreneurs, whether it's a done with you or a done for you type of a service, to go, let's look at your content and let's focus on, first of all, how can we design it in the best way possible? And if something is already built, to look at it and say, okay, what do we do to make it better?
Right.
And that's really been my mission of late, to go, because there's a lot of flat, boring stuff out there and we kind of need to knock it off.
There's a heck of a lot of boring stuff out there. And I think that's probably the biggest issue is people just, they don't know what they're doing. And like you said, there for a while, it was a captive audience. So we didn't care.
Yeah.
But now that we can go back to meeting in person and all of these various things, everybody has to step up their game. And I loved reading your book. I read it yesterday and I kept thinking, the light bulbs just kept going because,
good.
It was, I really was thinking, okay, I'm one of those people, and I'm sure you hear this all the time, that goes, okay, I'll do an online course or a webinar or whatever, and I'm going to spend 10 minutes putting it together. And we don't give any thought to, we don't do anything. And so, it was so fascinating to read your book, to go through all of the steps that you really have to consider. I mean, and we'll obviously talk about that in detail, but really figuring out what people want.
Yeah. Who
are they? What are their demographics? I mean, the things that for marketing we do. But really figuring out, and then even simple things like, okay, do people even have the technology to be doing this?
Yeah.
And is it going to be live? And then, of course, I always want to say Memorex, but most people don't understand that concept.
We're back to the Al Gore era again.
And so is it live? Is it recorded? Is it a combination? Is it a hybrid? And of course, the first question that I always think of is, okay, I had this presentation before, so pre-COVID. Can't I just now do it online? So what do you say to people who say that?
Well, you can. But the trick is you have to think about, well, I'm delivering this in a different way. So you look at it and you analyze it and you think through, well, is this content the right content for the audience that I'm going to be working with? And then you want to think about, well, what types of exercises that I do in the live setting and how would I translate those into doing it on Zoom? One of the simplest transitions is, if you want to, oftentimes we would have people do a table exercise when we're live, right? Discuss amongst your table and then come back and share with the large group. Well, you can do that in Zoom by putting people into a breakout room,
right?
And then have them come back and discuss. Where there's a challenge is, and we experienced this, I think, earlier today, when you send people to a breakout room, then they're like, what are we supposed to do?
What are we doing? Yeah. And they don't follow the instructions at all.
What are the instructions? And because the instructions were, they're back in the main room. So the way to mitigate that is, if you're doing it in more of a training context, is to have a handout.
Right.
That you drop in the chat so people can grab it and look at it. And you can say, we're going to do the exercise on page 1.
Right.
So that then they can look at the instructions. Similarly to if you're doing something in person, oftentimes the instructions are either in the handout,
right, or they're on the big screen that's up
there. Exactly.
Right.
So people can see them, and then they're like, okay, yeah, I know now. I remember exactly what to do.
Right.
And that's the first part of it. And then we have different options there. There's the chat feature. So you think about, well, when do I want to use chat? And it can be, type of 1 for yes, type of 2
and do
for
we
no.
even want people to? Because
yes.
we see that happen where people, and they start having these totally off the topic discussions, and
you just disable, so you can disable the chat. So it's really, okay, so now I'm on Zoom. So what does that mean? And how can I interact with people on Zoom? Which again comes back to the whole idea around design. You want to design for the delivery method.
Right.
And then if you want to take that and let's say you want to transition it and say, well, now how can I do this in an evergreen format? Okay, what's different now?
Right.
So if we follow through the same example, when you go to evergreen, you run into another challenge in that people get the instructions for whatever activity they're going to do, and they're working independently. If they have a question,
you're not there to answer.
Exactly. So one of the main elements that I encourage people to do all the time when I work with them is make sure you test your instructions. And the challenge is sometimes as an expert, there's certain ideas or elements or steps that we may have just embodied and forgotten to say, and here's how you do it. And that's, to me, is the most, and it doesn't take, a lot of work to plan, but if you just step back and plan it and think through, okay, who do I want to reach? Where do I want to take them to? Where are they now? And then what do I need to do to close the gap? And how can I make it interesting and engaging in a Zoom format or an evergreen format?
Right. Yeah. And part of what I loved in your book is you have all these templates in there.
Yes.
You start going through and working through this process. And so I encourage people to really think about this, because it's not just, hey, I'm going to do it. It really is, especially if you're going to sell it, and that's the key. Are you creating something where people are subscribing and all that? You want it to be good. And, one of the things that I was thinking was, you mentioned the word engaging. When we're live in person, and in person is that, it's a totally different format. I mean, you and I have done lots of presentations. If you think you might be losing people, maybe you're the speaker after lunch, then, okay, you might tap dance. I mean, you might,
yes. And you can do things.
You can bring them back. There's, and when we're watching it, it's just like if we're watching a TV program. We get up, we go to the bathroom, we get a drink, we may or may not remember to turn our camera on or off. And this is if you're doing it live. I mean, if it's recorded, it's even different. And so, I love that you talk about that we have to have fun with this too, because we don't want to be the talking Zoom head.
Right. You want to bring your personality to it. And there's something about, when people are on Zoom and they're presenting, there's a level of animation that's there. Somehow when it goes to just recording with nobody there, then people get flatter, they get quieter, and forget, you got to be looking at the camera. You got to be loving that camera. One of the things that I've recommended to people is, if they have that, is invite a few people when you're doing your recording. So you can be presenting to someone and you can see somebody smiling and nodding their head, and it kind of keeps the energy up, because you got to really work hard to stay at the right level.
I had a trick that I used to do when I did webinars pre-COVID. And so there really wasn't Zoom, right? There was a little bit of Zoom, but we didn't, the software that we used was specific for webinars. And you frequently had no idea if there were even anybody there. And so you were just literally talking to yourself. And so I, that's fun. But I had dolls. And, so I, it worked, so I had, business Barbie and, and I would put them right, in front of my monitor. So I was talking to them. So I was at least talking to something.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, one of the biggest challenges that people have is, especially if you're just recording it, we lose that animation. We start just reading this, the material. And then immediately people
just
tone
gets
out.
they just and it's interesting that you mentioned that, because one of my favorite examples to share with people is the safety briefing on United Airlines.
Right.
So if you are on the plane and the flight attendant is going to walk you through it, the only time you really look at them, sorry, ladies and gentlemen, is if they're close, if their proximity is such that you'd feel rude if you weren't
if you're reading the book and they're right there, you're like,
they're right there. Yeah, they're just
look at them.
And okay, I got to stop what I'm doing and pay attention. When the video comes up, people are more inclined to watch the video. And what's really fascinating about this video to me, and kind of then I started looking across more places, is every time they transition to a new skill that we need to learn, or safety element that we need to learn. So from the seatbelt, which, like, I don't know why nobody knows how to put on a seatbelt, but apparently we don't. So from the seatbelt to the mask and everything, it's a different scene. And it's also in a different part of the world. So there's two things going on. You're okay, I know how to put on a seatbelt, thank you very much. But it's like, oh, they're in Germany now. I'd kind of like to go to Germany for Oktoberfest, or, oh, they're in Bali now. I'd kind of like, so they're hitting you on two levels. And then the other part of it, which is big, a light bulb went off in my head, is there's also within each of those scenes, there's a lot of movement. Things are changing.
Right. And so it captures your attention.
It captures your attention. And we're conditioned to watching on a screen, a television show, a movie, even a new show, a commercial, where there's a lot of movement and there's a lot that's changing. So now here we are, we come forward and we're doing our recordings for our courses, and it's a lot of talking head. It's slides that stay up too long. The sins that people made on the big screen, on the big stage,
are now on your little monitor.
Because you're on the little monitor. So you want to be thinking about, how can I keep making changes? And one of the tools that I invested in, and I can switch my camera and I can show you what something that people can do, is a stream deck. So pardon me for looking off to the side, because this just occurred to me to talk about this now. So I'm going to do it. And the stream deck, I use it because I'm a Mac user, with a product called Ecamm.
Okay.
And Ecamm allows you to create a series of scenes that you then will connect to the stream deck, which is the hardware. So I'll hold up the hardware in front of the camera. So this is the hardware. So there's buttons on here that I can push to go from scene to scene to scene that I've built in Ecamm. Now, if somebody is on a PC, the tool that they're going to use there is either OBS, or there's a product out there called Manycam. And that allows you on the software to create the different scenes that you want to have. And then you can connect it to the hardware.
Right. And so again, you're capturing people's attention when you're changing scenes.
Exactly. So I'm going to show you what that works like now that I have my Ecamm virtual camera up. So one of the things that you can notice here is by using this,
all of a sudden have your logo.
My logo. So that's a graphic overlay. Now, this is very powerful to use when you're working live. And I'm also going to talk about why it can be used then from your recording.
Well, and I love this because it's not a green screen.
Exactly.
Green screens drive me nuts. We know that you're not in Bali giving your presentation.
Exactly. And
and
keep
when
disappearing.
You move and it goes boogity boogity in your
Exactly.
head, or you hold something,
it just gets kind of,
or like my
computer
computer doesn't have enough oomph. And so I glow, and it's like, no, And so I love this. So it's just this little graphic that is put
Little
of your
graphic,
logo up
and
above your shoulder.
and I keep this background very simple. So I have this painting
Right.
behind me, and because I agree with you, I don't like the green screens unless somebody really knows how to use it.
Right.
Which is having the powerful computer and having the right lighting. That makes a huge difference. So this is simpler. So if I'm doing something on Zoom, for example, I can come in at the beginning and I can have my countdown timer.
Oh.
So this comes on, la, 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 and I can be working the room essentially. So as I'm letting people in, I'll start letting everybody in about 10 minutes ahead. How are you? Where are you from? What do you hope to get out of the day? Which is very similar to what you would do.
Right. Yeah. You're going to be wandering the crowd.
Right? Then I can switch back to this shot of me being on camera. And I run my presentation through my iPad. So if I switch to this button, now just pretend for some reason it's not firing. I don't think I have it plugged in, but pretend this is a presentation. Pretend this is not a blank screen.
Well, that's all right.
Oh, you know what? My screen went dark. So that's what happened. So I was talking too much and it went to sleep.
And, so this is what happens on live presentations, folks, and so you have to be able to go with the flow.
Just keep moving.
Yeah.
So I quickly brought it back up. And so, here we are. Here's our poor soul that's been, is just so tired of online learning. But I just, so I can be working through the presentation. I can talk about, here's my key point. This is sin number 1. My course is so great. It'll work for everyone. But then I can come back and I can be on camera, and then I continue to talk to the audience.
That was a totally seamless transition.
Totally seamless transition. No screen share fumble. Okay, I'm sharing my screen. Can you see
everybody
see it?
Can you see it? What do you mean you can't see it? Oh.
You can also run video through. Now, for some reason, I'm having a problem with sound coming through, but this is just a short little animated logo that I put together. So when you're starting online,
right, that's a good way to start the program.
Right, you can be in the countdown timer. You can go to the little video. You can come back to being on camera, and then the best part to me is the way that you can go back and forth between the slides and being on camera, and you don't miss a beat. Right. You can also do a screen share. So this would be the screen share. There's my calendar. I'm very busy today. But I would have that set up and be sized properly. Right. But I spontaneously, as we were talking, thought this would be a good thing to mention.
Right. I love it.
Now, the other part in this that's really good is, let's say I wanted to do a recording. Well, I can do that same thing by switching from scene to scene. I can have multiple graphics. I can set it up to have more than this one graphic overlay of my logo. But let's say I wanted to have a lower third with my website, or call to action,
the call, emphasize. Like on CNN, they've got the stuff at the bottom.
You can do those kinds of things and have them set up in advance, and then just transition between them. So then when you're done with your recording, and I'm showing you just very simple, there's more that you can do than what I know. I'm continuing to learn about this every day. But when you go to edit your recording, then what's fantastic is you cut out the beginning, you cut out the end, and you keep what's in the middle. And maybe you had to do over something because the dog started barking or whatever. But you don't have to do as much editing after the fact. So it can save you some time and money there. And then if you can have the opportunity, then if you want to go to an editor, they can do things that are, leveled up from where you are. But
now, what was that software again?
So the software is called Ecamm, ECAMM is for a Mac. Okay. And then OBS is what people use on a PC. Okay. And they both are compatible
with the little control-y panel thing.
The Stream Deck. And this is the part, to me, that's the real, you can change between scenes within the software. Right. But that's a little bit clunky.
Right. You're just touching the keypad to change what it is.
And the other thing is I could set up another camera. So there's some people that I know, one person I work with, she's a chef. So she could do things where she has a camera,
an overhead view of
overhead,
chop,
and
chop,
she
chop,
can
chop,
then,
chop, chop.
watch me chop the vegetables and not cut off my finger. So you can bring in more camera angles. You can have all kinds of input. So you can extend this. It's like having a little broadcast studio. Right. at home.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is something that's important for people to really think about. How can they level up?
Mm-hmm.
I presented at an event yesterday and I blew everybody away. And I was the only speaker that had this type of a configuration out of the group. And so everybody was like, oh, damn, how'd you do that?
Yeah.
So it really, it was one of many ways that I set myself apart from the crowd.
Yeah. Well, and the reason we're talking about this, folks, is you want to charge money for what you're doing, right?
Yes.
And the more professional it looks, the more you can charge, and also, like if you charge everybody $20, okay, fine. But, and, your pricing is not, obviously pricing is a factor, but, when you start charging a premium price, people want to look at it. They want to know that you're not going to be going, can you see my slides? Can you, just all of those things. They don't want you cutting out in the middle, and so you need to be thinking of this as an investment in your business. You need to have the right equipment, the right lighting.
Right.
If your Wi-Fi is going to get hinky, then you need to do something about that.
Exactly.
All these things. And I love in your book, one of the things you talk about is kind of a cost benefit analysis. So if you've got, this online training and you sell it to 100 people, doesn't seem like a lot, right? You sold it for $50. That's $5,000, right? I got all my zeros in there.
I think so.
And so then when you start thinking about that, that's what really starts adding up. And I love, because you've got in your book, you've got several different things that people can be considering, because there's, like we said, there's live, there's the online training, there's, all sorts of different things that you can be using. And one of the things that I really liked in the book was you were talking about the fact that many of these things are now, as you said, evergreen. They're self-sustaining. People can be doing them at 3 a.m. in their jammies. Yeah. And you can be off in Bora Bora.
Wherever the heck you want to be, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like being an author. I mean, people can read your book whenever. And this is kind of the same concept. They're able to be engaging in your content at any point in time. And, now, obviously live is different, but everything else, it is in essence, set it and forget it.
Yeah. And it's really looking at your content from the angle of, well, what makes sense for people to do kind of independently on their own. And where do I need to be there and engage? There's certain skills that people have to demonstrate. Somebody could independently learn about what it takes to be a better speaker, and they can watch all the stuff and they can write it and they can do it. But in the next level is to give a speech and get feedback from someone.
You need people
that will tell you, or certain skills. I worked on a project for Pacific Gas and Electric. It was in their welding curriculum. At some point they got to pick up the torch, right? They can't just do.
I know. I always wonder about online learning, like for medical people. I'm like, okay, that's great, but what happens when they have to poke me with the needle?
Yeah, exactly. I think, learning about, the concepts, what are, okay, these are the types of allergic reactions that somebody could have, that's something you can, those things that are more, the knowledge that you need to
there's
acquire.
hands-on at some point.
Yeah, like the surgeon is like, I took the online course. I'm ready to take out your appendix. I don't think so. I think
that I don't know why I just thought of this. I saw this yesterday on Facebook, and it was kind of the same thing. The surgeon he's talking to the person, and he said, just David, you can do this. You have watched all the videos. And the patient says, my name's not David. And the doctor says, mine is. So he was telling himself he could do it because he'd watched all the videos. Funny. And it was like, oh gosh. But this brings me back to kind of, maybe it's the start. Why should people even be doing this? I mean, COVID aside, all of that, whatever. Why should people even be thinking about doing online courses and online presentations and training?
Okay. Well, there's one place to look at it is the new kind of where we are. Now there's a lot of hybrid models out there. So in terms of actually being live, whether you're in person or on Zoom or Teams, or other platforms that are out there, I'm sure,
Mhm.
is you have to be ready to deliver something in person.
Mhm.
You got to be ready to deliver something on Zoom.
Mhm.
And you also have to be ready to do something in a hybrid format.
Mhm.
And I had the opportunity to do that last week when I did my program for the National Speakers Association in Colorado.
Mhm.
There were about 40 people in the room with
Mhm.
me, and there were another 15 or 20 people that were on Zoom.
Mhm.
So I had to be mindful
Mhm.
of what's happening with the people in Zoom.
Right.
And it was
Are they still paying attention?
Are they still paying attention? And what was great is there was somebody that was monitoring what was happening on Zoom.
Mhm.
So if there were questions from people that were, the home audience, then, he could bring them in and he could let me know.
Right.
And I had to remember, okay, anything happening out there with with the home
Hello?
audience. The studio's good. How are things going at home?
Mhm.
So I had to be really mindful of that. I also had to think about where the camera was. And one simple question to ask is, how can I move around?
Right. Yeah. Are you going to walk off camera?
Will the camera follow me or is the camera stationary?
Mhm.
And I also had to have my presentation. I had to be logged into Zoom, mute myself in Zoom and share it so that the people they had it, all wired.
Okay. So they weren't, the camera wasn't on the presentation. They were able to see it on Zoom.
Yeah. So they were able to see it on Zoom. So they had a better experience than trying to, because when you film something on a screen, it doesn't always,
it does the wavery thing.
It can be a little hinky. So that was all. So these are all the kind of interesting elements to consider. But what was funnier to me is it was like, oh, I have to have physical handouts because the people in the room couldn't just drop it in the chat for everyone.
We got used to not being in person.
Yeah, we really did. And then had my clicker to advance the slides. I've forgotten how to do that.
I know.
I had to practice. I had to remember,
batteries.
Okay, what to do and how does the pointer work? And then, then balancing too, wanting to move around, but looking at the space, which we all need to do in person.
Right.
And if I decided to walk across the stage, I'd walk in front of the way that the projection was. I would have walked in front of the slide, so that wouldn't have worked either. So I couldn't stand in the middle, and I couldn't. So I had to so you had to all those logistics. It was interesting to me that I really had to remember what it was like to be in person, get that squared away, and then look at, okay, now I've got the home audience, and what do I need to do to keep them engaged? So it's a really good experience, and that's what we need to be prepared for.
Right.
In addition to then looking at content and saying, well, what really makes sense to be evergreen? And we just had the conversation around, things that are knowledge. Great. You can do that in the evergreen format. If there's some skills, the medical profession, surgeons, people taking blood, whatever, right? They've got to practice and somebody has to give them feedback and let them know if they're doing it correctly. So not everything can translate 100% to an online format.
Right.
So I think for our audience today, one of the great ways for you to get an idea of what you could put online is there content that you'd say over and over and over again to everyone you work with every time? That's a great clue that you can extract that and put it into an online format, which then allows you to work with them at a deeper level when you get into a group or one-on-one situation. Right. And this could be for a coach or a consultant. And it allows you to serve more people or have more time for yourself to do other
off to Bora Bora again.
Red to go to Bora Bora. Yes, we've got that. I'm going to have to check on what it costs to go there when we're done. But so that's a great way to look at it. We're at a point now too, where I believe people are tired of just doing things online by themselves. Because we have the opportunity to have more community. So a larger play, and I talk about this in the book, and there's a spreadsheet in there where people can look at what the revenue opportunity is to think about, well, if I incorporate this into a group program, so let's say my group program is $2,000. I can have 10 people do the group,
Mm-hmm.
and that's 20,000.
Right.
Well, if my course is $100,
Mm-hmm.
let's see if I can get the math right here. I have to sell 200
Right.
to get to the
Mm-hmm.
same amount.
Mm-hmm.
And what to get those numbers, you have to think
Mm-hmm.
about, well, how many people on my list or when I do my outreach, and it's a numbers game to be able to get down to, well, how many people are actually going to buy.
Mm-hmm.
So you can sell more.
Mm-hmm.
I think the larger play is selling the bigger ticket items, and a value add is you're also going to get my online
right
as part of the offer.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another element. People that are out and they're professional speakers, there's the aftercare. You go in, you don't want to just go in and give the speech, get the check and go home and maybe I'll see you next year. But you can offer some aftercare, and that's a point where an online course or doing a webinar series for them could be a great ad, where your engagement isn't just the one day, but you can start to build a longer term relationship.
Right. And people need to be thinking about it. And the spreadsheet is a real good thing to be looking at with this, the combinations of things.
Yes.
You were kind of talking about that. It's like one of the things I'm considering is doing a 5-minute, 5-part series that's free. People just, but it's a teaser in essence. They might get everything they want out of the 5. Okay, fine. But if they want more, then there's the online, whether it's a webinar, whether it's, whatever it is, but then that's what they'll pay for, and so then you got to put your marketing hat back on. You don't want to give it all away in those short, because, especially if you're not charging for them or charging a very small amount, because you want that funnel to be putting them into the bigger ticket items.
Exactly.
And again, those bigger ticket items have got to be worth it. And they especially need to, because we live in this world of social media. The worst thing would be if, you say you went on LinkedIn and you promoted all of this, and it was, $1,000 and boring as all get out. Everybody's going to post in there, oh my God, don't spend the money because this is a horrible thing. They very rarely do they go on and say, this was fabulous, right?
Yeah.
And so you have to keep in mind that you have to manage those expectations.
People feel like, well, my content was so great. The webinars went really well. Right. People love the webinars. So they're going to watch the recording. And what they forget is when I'm watching a recording, I'm not part of the experience. Right. I'm not part of the group.
It's like watching the TV program. You're going to go to the bathroom, you're going to do whatever.
And typically, webinars run 45 minutes to an hour. When people are watching video, they need to be shorter, like 3 to 5 minutes. And now with the advent of TikTok, YouTube Shorts.
Yeah, short.
These things are like they're a minute or less. So the amount that we're watching is compressing.
Right.
And again, it comes down to, oftentimes, the webinar recording, it's a longer, they're too long to convert.
Right.
People kind of, have a sense, there's like an expectation that there's going to be more going on. And I think it's subliminal, because of what I talked about before, that we're accustomed to seeing things changing and moving when we're watching, let's say, a program.
Right. I love in your book, one of the things you talk about is, say you're going to film all of them at once, you're doing your 5-part series. And one of the keys is when you start the next one, you're going to say, now remember, in the last one we talked about. So it is kind of this continuous thing, back to TV. We don't like jumping in the middle, and not knowing what's going on. You want to kind of bring them back in again with that 1 or 2 sentence. In the last video, we learned about, this is how you chop carrots without cutting your finger off. Yeah. Now we're going to talk about what you're going to do with those carrots.
Yes.
And so it's just simple things like that.
Simple transitions.
Yeah. And you might film it all as one thing, but then you're able to edit those pieces down.
And, client that I'm working with now, and she's going to just record all of her intro and transitions. So, welcome to lesson number one. And lesson number one, we're going to talk about celery.
Right.
Then you finish, and then as you mentioned, then you get to the end, and then you have the transition to the next one, and then you record the intro. So you record the intro and the outro.
Right. Is there any content that works better for online courses than because we've kind of talked about several different things? Is there something that really does work very well?
I think the type of content that works really well is when you're trying to build knowledge.
Okay.
So concepts, ideas, methodologies, models, approaches, that type of content can work really, really well. And and I think if we flip it, what doesn't work well is if somebody has to physically practice something. And that could even be as simple as a role play. So let's say somebody's learning sales skills. They can go through, they can learn all about sales. They can learn about handling objections, but it's a very different feeling when you make your pitch and somebody throws the, price is one of the common objections. Well, I don't think I can afford that. It's different to read about it or watch it than to actually go, what is going to be your response to that?
And I like I said, I loved your book, and there were so many things in there with like, ooh.
Thank you.
And we've been talking about how to keep things engaging. And when I got to the chapter where you were talking about the add-ons that can be done to get people engaged, and I just was fascinated with that, and these are things that they're doing. So talk to us a little bit about some of those things that, and some of them come built into Zoom anymore. Some of them are extra things. But again, these are things so that people just aren't sitting there watching and going, well, this is fun. And wait, my email just, okay. And then pretty soon you're looking out and everybody's turned their camera off. So what are some of the things to keep people really actively engaged?
Well, there's the whiteboard in Zoom that you can ask people to come in and they can write on it and engage there. Another tool that's great, that's similar, is to bring up a Google Jamboard. And I like the Google Jamboard because one of the options is like a little sticky note. So they can type something on a sticky note and you can move it around. Now, I haven't used the Zoom whiteboard for a while, so perhaps it's
and of course all these change every day.
They change every day. Yeah, that's just kind of how it is. But having people work in the Google Jamboard, and then you can easily share it with them after the fact. And there's all kinds of other collaboration tools that are out there.
You were talking about like a word cloud one, things like that.
Yes. So the tool that I like to use to generate those, it's called Mentimeter, and Menti has all kinds of visual outputs, which make it very appealing. So you would type in instead of a polling question, you could say, give me one word that describes what you would like to get out of the day, or put in what you want to get out of the day. And then everybody types it in and it shows up as a word cloud. Or you could say, when you think of leadership, what do you think is the most important quality of a leader? And then they could type in the word, and then it displays in a word cloud. You could also have output in there, a bar chart, a pie chart, and different types of charts. So they've got all kinds of visual representations, which makes it more interesting than just doing a polling question. There's then another tool that's kind of fun. It's called Kahoot, and it's K-A with a K. I don't know if you spell Kahoot with a C in other contexts, but this is with a K. I don't know. Anyway, and when you use that, it's great to use in the Zoom setting, because you ask questions, people answer them, and then there's a leaderboard. So it's always ranking who's done the best with the questions. You can also set it up to use if people are working virtually, and let's say they're part of a team. So if you're selling into the corporate market, which a lot of my clients do, you could set something like this up so the team is working on it, and as everybody's in and out of it, the leaderboard can change.
Yeah.
So that's
so
kind
like
of a fun,
Indianapolis is better than Denver
yeah.
is, or whatever.
And it connects in with a smartphone.
Mm-hmm.
And then another tool that I like to bring in is done by Amy Clymer, and that's Climer.
Mm-hmm.
And she originally had a series of cards, like a card deck, so a physical deck that she would bring into an in-person session.
Mm-hmm.
She turned them into a virtual deck.
Right.
So
almost like tarot cards, but not, but they have images on them.
They're beautiful images.
Mm-hmm.
And all of the images come up on the screen. So you would pose a question.
Mm-hmm.
Now that we completed that, now that we're halfway through the day, which of these images represents how you're feeling about where you are in the process, or something like that. Then people click on the image, and then it flips over, and then they write on the back any comments that they have. And then you can share it with the group. And it's a really nice way of keeping people involved. I like using it at the beginning of a session. What do you hope to, how do you, how does this represent how you're feeling before we get started? And then you can do it at the end of the day, kind of to see how
did
things.
Did it match? Did it meet your expectations?
So those are really a lot of fun to use. And it just, it just makes things more interesting. Number one, you're not just talking at people, but you're getting them involved in doing. And I believe the fastest that you can get people doing something, you're going to hold their interest.
Right.
Be ready to be asking a lot of questions, whether you're saying, give me a 1 or a 2 in the chat, because if they, oh man, she's going to ask me a question, I got to be ready.
I better pay attention.
Yeah. So those are some kind of, tools, and there are more coming every day. And then it's just sort of getting into the groove of having them up and ready to use, so that you can just, make the magic happen.
Right. And of course, the big thing, as we're talking about all of this, and even, as I was reading the book, there's this one very important word in there, and that's practice. Especially when you're doing all the tech and things like that. I mean, whether you're by yourself or you're having, you're practicing and you've got, a little sample audience or whatever who's participating. The worst thing is to be trying something for the first time with people who are paying money, because it's not going to work. There will be something that will go wrong.
Something can go wrong.
And
doing it, practicing with the tech is great. And I'm a big believer in having somebody there that acts as your digital producer. And their role is to kind of monitor the chat.
Right.
And if somebody's having any, well, where's the handout? They can be dealing with all of that. Or I can't hear you.
Or
so they can work that all in the background, and then allows you to stay focused on doing your delivery.
Right.
I had something happen to me once, and fortunately, because I'm in the business I'm in, I was able to turn it into a teachable moment. I had brought up I don't know which one it was. It was one of the 3 that I mentioned. It's either Mentimeter, the Climer cards, or Kahoot. And I'm going to do a demonstration. And I go to click on it, and I'm looking over my screen where I would have clicked on it, and it's not working.
Oh.
So what came to me was to turn that into a moment to teach people, to say, okay, I had this all set up.
Right.
I tested it this morning. Clearly I was ready to go. And I made a point of having everything ready. And I probably had the browser open too long, and it just said, we're not doing this. What I was able to say is, if you plan something and it doesn't work, you need to be prepared to go in another direction. So it worked for me because I turned it into, a lesson. What are you going to do if your slides don't come up?
Don't work. Yeah.
If something fails.
It's the old overhead projector. What if your overhead projector bulb doesn't work? Can you still give your presentation?
Right. Right. And that's, if you walk, can you deliver? So, it's all good.
The other thing, and I learned this one the hard way, is if you're showing something live behind you, like and you have to be very careful with that, because you never know what's going to happen. And so I was, like when you showed your screen and it was your calendar for the day, obviously, as you said, we were just doing this on the fly, but I was giving a presentation one time on how to use Facebook for a business tool. and I turn my Facebook feed on live behind me. And, and I hear this collective gasp.
Oops.
Yeah. And whatever had been posted was not what you wanted the world to see. And so I learned, okay, the best thing are called screenshots, and because it was kind of one of those things where, you weren't sure. But that comes back to the whole planning thing. If you're doing something like this, set up your space. We're on, this is episode 841. Most of the time things go very well, but there have been some times that are absolutely hilarious that have happened during the podcast. I mean, I've had people walk through. That's always entertaining. I had one time where this was at the start of COVID, and this gentleman that I was interviewing did not have his home office set up yet. He just didn't. And so he's at his kitchen table. That was, many people were like that. But in the middle of the podcast, his teenage son bebops into the kitchen, doesn't say a word, fixes his sandwich, and bebops back out. We see this whole thing.
Yeah.
I've had animals appear, usually cats, right? Because they come up.
Cats are usually coming in. Yeah.
Yeah. And
dogs.
So, if you're doing this, especially if you're doing it live, I mean, obviously if you're recording it and something happens, you just cut that out. But if you're doing something live, you don't want the cat to go wandering across in front of the screen. and so, again, that it comes back to if free, paid, whatever, make sure that you have control of your environment.
Yes. Yeah. As much as you can. Now, there, things could happen now.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, the power could go down. I mean,
right.
There's all sorts of things.
The sun is shining here in Northern California today, but we had rain almost nonstop for 2 weeks. And there was a risk of losing Wi-Fi at any time throughout that whole window. Yeah. So there's a thing called a hotspot.
Oh yeah. And other basic things. I mean, I remember when we first started really, doing this during COVID, and it was sports people. I don't know. I was watching some sports things, and everybody got fascinated with what was on the bookshelves behind them. What were they reading?
Yes.
Right. And so what is your background? Do you want it to be, and typically when I'm interviewing authors, a lot of times they'll have their book back there. That's great. They're selling it the whole time, and things like that. But what is back there? You see, there it is.
I haven't figured out how to get the book in the shop yet.
I know. But it really is something, because again, we want to be professional. How many times have we done a Zoom with somebody and their camera's not in the right place? I don't want to see up their nose. I don't want to see the ceiling. I did an entire interview with somebody one time where I was talking to their ear. They had their, and I'm like, really, you see what I see, right? But again, if you're charging money for this, folks, and this is the whole goal, this is what we want you to do, then make it professional. And it's not that difficult, and it's not going to cost you a fortune to do it.
And really, I mean, we both have very simple, straightforward backgrounds.
And we actually color coordinated. We didn't know.
Yeah, we did. Who knew, right? And and I've seen people where, a couple of years ago, I auditioned, I did a comedy routine, and I auditioned for America's Got Talent. And I made it through 2 rounds. So I was very proud of myself.
Oh, cool.
It was all virtual. And I'm thinking to myself, you're auditioning to be on TV. You might want to make your bed. Like, come on.
Oh, yeah.
The people just, didn't think about it.
I knew somebody who, when COVID started, they were set up in their bedroom. And she said she never really thought about it. And she said, but it was neat. It was not this mess. But she said she never really thought about it until somebody asked her where she bought her bedspread. And she said right then she thought, nope, this is not professional. I need a screen behind me. And folks, it's easy to make a screen to put behind yourself. And like my wall back here, I don't know, my wall might be too busy, but it's stick-on wallpaper. Cost me $40. I figured if I didn't like it, I just unstuck
You can just change it. Yeah.
So, well,
and
oh
it's
my
really,
gosh. Go ahead.
It's just important to remember when we do these types of programs, we are showing ourselves and what we know. And if things are distracting, you're going to lose people.
Right.
And remember this, this is about you and your brand.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. And again, it's not that difficult, folks, to make this work. Well, oh my gosh. We are at the top of the hour. And I think we've just scratched the surface on this, because it is something that more and more we're going to do, whether it's total, online or hybrid or all these various combinations. And so I think we definitely have to have you on again, because it is something that is so important to folks. But until then, okay, hold up the book again. The book is called and is due out today. Bundle Your Brilliance, turn your expertise into profitable online courses. Profitable, that's the key word there, folks.
Yes.
Profitable online courses. But tell us, because for the people who went, I want to do this, but oh my God, it sounds way too hard and way too complicated. Do you work with people to help them through this process?
Yes. So the book is really the culmination of all of my experience, and I tried to distill it down and make it as practical as possible for people to follow through. But I also work with people in groups. I run groups at different times during the year, and there's a 12-week program that people can participate in. And I'm working now on an accelerated program to kind of help people kickstart. That's going to be 3 weeks to just kind of get rolling and, get their framework and design squared away. And then I'll work with people one-on-one, either in a done with you type of a format, like the group where I'm coaching people through, or I'll do a done for you type of a service if people are like, I just can't.
Yeah.
And that happens really with more, not so much the solopreneur, entrepreneur, but small, medium-sized businesses. Right. Often they want you to come in and do and build it out for them. But I work with people in, any way that makes the most sense. I like to meet people where they are and take them where they need to go.
I love it. Well, how do they find you?
Well, the best way to find me is, the book's on Amazon. We'll start there. So if you search Bundle Your Brilliance on Amazon, you'll find it. It's the only thing that shows up. Yes. And my website is nancygiere.com. So if you're watching, you can see my first name, last name. If you're listening, Giere is spelled Giere. And my email is nancy@nancygiere.com. So that you can reach out to me by shooting me an email. And if you want to call me, that's 414-315-9809.
I love it. And this really has been so much fun. And as I was saying, as I was reading through your book, I was thinking, this is a lot, not more difficult than I've always thought it would be, but what I was thinking was, I need to take this more seriously, and especially if you're going to charge money. And let's be honest, even if you're not charging for it, maybe you're just doing this as a promotional thing. Again, you want to be professional. You want people to say, hey, we want to work with this person. We want to refer to this person. So you want to, do the best you can. And again, I love the book. I thought it was just great. I'm going to go back through and really do it step by step. Because it's really hard sometimes when I have the digital version. It's like, but yeah, so it will be fun. Do you have, like I said, we'll have you on again. But until then, do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
Well, my final thought is, be intentional when you're designing your programs, and really think about who your audience is, just like you would for your marketing. What do they need? And ask yourself the question, when they finish my program, what do I want them to be able to do, know, and feel? And have that be your guiding light as you work through creating your course.
I love it. Perfect. Yeah, you talk in your book about you start at the end.
Yes.
And so I love it. So again, the book is called Bundle Your Brilliance, turn your expertise. Go to it, Ivana. Bundle Your Brilliance, turn your expertise into profitable online courses. I'm Deb Krier. I've been having so much fun talking with my friend Nancy Giere. She is a course creation expert. But until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.